Okay, so I once did a video very early on in this channel called The Film Bro Effect. It's still today my most viewed video, and honestly, I don't even think it holds up. I haven't seen it in many months, but I'd for sure change a lot of things about that video, but regardless, I'm quite proud of it. I'm hoping one day to have a video that exceeds it, but here we are. In my path to be some sort of critic or movie talking person, I've encountered many film bros, some not so bad, some awful ones. I always seem to attract the hate of them, and that's just part of my film ecosystem now. And the other day I watched a video from Adam from the They Live By Film podcast, and he did a film bro tier list, and since the community is so intrinsically part of my life, I decided to copy him and do one also. We have very different tier lists though, and orders obviously, because I've made this one myself, so definitely go and check his out. And while you're there, go and check out the They Live By Film podcast, it's incredible. Personally, I'd recommend the Women Make Noir episode, so let's get into it. We have 32 films to talk about, and these are our categories. At the top we have genuine cinema, then we have actually good, decent time, it's fine, actually bad, and finally, what are we even doing here? Seriously. And link to this tier list will be in the pinned comment, so please do your own versions and send them to me on Twitter here. I made this one specifically for this video, so I'm definitely interested in your opinions. Okay, so first of all, we have Uncut Gems, and this is one of those film bro films that entirely depends on the person. It's not always found in the film bro canon because it's a much newer film than most film bro films. They tend to go for older movies, but I definitely see this being more regularly seen in the catalogue later on, and I'm already seeing it being used now. I think the appeal here is that it's an independent film about a straight white male with severe mental issues, and you'll notice that trend a lot. But I'm gonna be real, I fucking love this movie. Anyone that's hung around excessively here knows I love this film. I for sure think it's Adam Sandler's best film, but Punch Drunk Love is a close argument. This film feels like a fucking heart attack on train tracks. It's non-stop adrenaline and every performance is incredible. Even Julia Fox, who is seemingly missing since this and the whole Kanye ordeal. So yeah, I think this is the Safdie Bros magnum opus, and I think this film is genuine cinema. Okay, so next we have our first but certainly not last Scorsese movie, Taxi Driver. Now of course, no film bro list is complete without Taxi Driver. It is the most quintessential film bro movie possibly ever. It's the first of the literally me films that we're going to talk about, which if you don't know, it just means, you know when those weirdos that you know talk about a film character that is like literally them, but they couldn't be any fucking different, and also they choose characters that nobody would ever want to be like because they're actual loner weirdos with social issues, but you know, people be like that. So now, this film is going to get me in some hot water because I love Scorsese, I love De Niro, I love when they work together, but I don't love this film. I think it's incredibly important, insanely quotable, well directed, well acted, great script from Paul Schrader, who we know by now I love, but I literally never want to watch this film ever. I mean, for Scorsese and De Niro films, you want to look more towards the 80s for The King of Comedy or Raging Bull. I do think it's good, but honestly, it's not much for me, so it's gonna go into decent time. Okay, so the next one is The Godfather, which is going to put me into even more hot water because my hottest take maybe of this whole video is that I don't like The Godfather that much. I don't hate it, don't get me wrong, I don't even think it's bad. Honestly, objectively, or as objective as you can get with art, it's quite fantastic. It's just really not for me personally. I'm not a huge gangster film enthusiast. There's a few exceptions, but this isn't one of them, so I'm just gonna stick it in It's Fine and move on before I get shot. Okay, so next we have Inception, which is our first and again, certainly not the last, Nolan film. Film bros tend to have a hard-on for a few directors like Scorsese, Tarantino, Fincher, and even some advanced film bros love David Lynch, but Nolan definitely is the film bro director. I could have put nearly every film he has ever made in here, so I really had to tone it down and only put a few that stand out. Inception being one of them. Now, honestly, this film is pretty good. It is mind-bending and introduced the idea of mind-bending cinema like this to the mainstream Western audiences, which is fantastic. fantastic, but the main problem of this film is that every time I watch it, I'm reminded I could just be watching Paprika instead. I don't have many deep thoughts on it, I just think it's a decent time. The visual effects are great and some of the sequences are pretty well done, as is the usual with Nolan, but yeah, it's more just Paprika light. I put it just below Taxi Driver because I do believe that this is a better made film, but there is entirely too much fat on it for me to even put it anywhere above that. Okay, so next is a lightning round, Donnie Darko, the quintessential teenage film bro movie, and for that time in someone's life I can definitely understand, but honestly this movie kinda sucks. So I'm gonna drop it into actually bad, and I wish I cared enough to say that this might be controversial or to say sorry, but like I don't really care. Anyway, we got The Wolf of Wall Street next, and this film is so divisive. I find that people either think it's one of the best films ever made or just overrated trash. The discourse is so hyperbolic, which is often the case in film anyway, but I land on this movie being pretty good. I love watching it, though I do it rarely. It is one of the best examples of Scorsese in the 21st century. The energy he taps into here is something you see throughout his filmography slowly getting better. He perfects it here. This is honestly the performance Leo should have gotten his Oscar for, and everything about it is just so infectious. One of the tightest scripts Scorsese has ever worked with, penned by Terrence Winter, and yeah, I just think it's a brilliant thrill ride. I don't think it's one of Scorsese's best works in terms of top 5s or whatever, but it is certainly great, so it's going into the actually good tier. Alright, so next we have a film I feel passionately about, which is Django Unchained. So as I said before, Tarantino is one of those directors film bros gravitate towards, and this movie is one of the better ones in my opinion. It truly is a great film. I think there is a bit too much fat around the third act, and Tarantino's actual cameo feels super weird and out of place, but every performance otherwise is fucking amazing. Leo is despicable and delivers every single line with intention and venom. Jamie Foxx, of course, crushes it far more than Will Smith ever would have. Sam Jackson, of course, being one of the most intimidating characters the entire time and morally most interesting. But my personal favourite is Christoph Waltz as Dr. King Schultz. Just hearing Jamie Foxx talk about him and Leo watching Waltz perform on the set of this film is enough to make you giddy because it entirely makes sense. He's just an absolute performer. The blood is the right amount. It's interesting to get a movie centered around slavery that isn't focusing too much on the brutality of it, but more so a fictionalized revenge story version as a reaction to that brutality. It's an interesting take for sure. The cinematography is top notch and I have very little to complain about, so it's going into genuine cinema tier. Just under Uncut Gems since I do love that film just that bit more. Okay, so next we have Prisoners by Denis Villeneuve, and yeah, this is pretty great. A few other Villeneuve films could qualify, one other does, but Prisoners for sure is one of those that really does stick with the film bro title. But again, this is one for good reason. It's really good. I definitely think Villeneuve has made better films since. In fact, I think every film he's made since is better, but this is in no way any worse because of that. Cinematography wise, it's definitely weaker than most of his filmography. But the performances here are just fucking insane, especially by Hugh Jackman. The puzzles and mystery setup are all complex and throw you off constantly. I think it's a great film that at times can be visually stale, but mostly makes up for it in the script and performance department, so I'm going to throw it into the actually good tier just below Wolf of Wall Street. Now we got Old Boy, possibly Park Chan-wook's most famous and decorated work, but honestly I think it's not even his best, not even top 2. I think both Handmaiden and Decision to Leave are better quality films, but this is regardless a brilliant film. It finds its place among these others by simply being the popular foreign film that film bros watch to say they've seen foreign films, which is fine if you don't see many foreign movies or if this is the only one that you have seen, but usually the film bro uses it to say that they watch foreign films when they really don't. I think this is a film that truly captures the raw energy of Park Chan-wook, which is a great energy, and there are some truly iconic set pieces, most notably the hallway scene, but otherwise I do find it a bit overrated. Not only in the scope of cinema, but also in foreign cinema, Asian cinema, and even Park Chan-wook's filmography, so it's going into actually good. It's an excellent film, just not the peak of cinema that people think it is, in my opinion anyway. Okay, so next we have The Dark Knight, which is often referred to as one of the best superhero movies of all time, and respectfully, I disagree. Aside from Heath Ledger's obvious great performance as the Joker, I don't think a whole lot is going on here. Christian Bale is still pretty good as Bruce Wayne / Batman. Michael Caine is the best on-screen Alfred for sure, but I honestly think this film is a downgrade from Batman Begins in so many ways. For one, Gotham City loses its entire personality. It goes from this very gothic and dingy, fog-filled brown cityscape with a real sense of identity and character to basically just New York City. The opening scene is really fun and a lot of the set pieces are, including the boat conundrum, but overall I think it's massively overrated as well. A good film, but without Ledger, it's a very average superhero time, so it's going in decent time. Above Inception, but below Taxi Driver, I think. Now, to be fair, I do say it's the average superhero time without Heath Ledger, but I will say, granted, in the current scope of things, in the current day, this is massively above average for a superhero film. But if we take a look at the entire scope of every superhero movie ever made, this does fall kind of average. Moving on, we have La La Land, which is one of 2 Damien Chazelle movies featured here, and I definitely think it's the inferior one. Cinematography wise, it's gorgeous, undeniably beautiful, as are our protagonists who have such inexplicable chemistry coming off the back of Crazy Stupid Love. Ryan Gosling and Emma Stone definitely understand each other as acting partners, and they honestly carry this script. Not to say it's a bad script, but given to lesser actors could be exhaustingly dull. I don't love it as much as other Chazelle movies, and I don't love it nearly as much as other people seem to. The fact that it was even in competition with Moonlight for Best Picture is insane. I mean, a lot of the time it struggles with identity. It can't decide whether it wants to be a musical or not, and that hesitation to be more of a musical honestly kills it. It's caught in this awkward in-between. So I'm gonna put it into the it's fine tier. I mean, it possibly does deserve a bit more than that, but I don't feel this movie all too much. If you want my full thoughts, we actually talk about it on my podcast, €3 per movie, so go and check out that episode if you want to. We also talk about Singing in the Rain and Damien Chazelle's newest film, Babylon. Anyway, plug over. Next is going to be a lightning round again because it's Nightcrawler and I have very limited thoughts on this one. I do need to rewatch it, granted, but it's our 3rd Jake Gyllenhaal film and I think it goes in between the other 2. This too is going into the it's fine tier. As a movie, it is much better than this tier, but on a purely personal note, I don't find myself thinking about this film pretty much at all, and the only time I do hear about it is from Film Bros, so yeah, it's fine. I will rewatch it and change it. Don't get mad at me, I know. Okay, next up we have The Shawshank Redemption, which is currently top of the IMDb Top 250, and I have to tell you, I have no idea why. It is a perfectly good film and for sure filled with interesting performances and moral questions, but I don't feel it's even a top 3 Stephen King adaptation. So to put it at the top of every movie ever is kind of insane. I've yet to hear a solid enough argument as to why it's the apparent greatest movie ever, and I very much doubt I will. I can't be convinced of it. Nobody can sell this movie enough to me. I have such little to say on it. It's good, but nowhere near the best. It's going into the decent time tier. Our next 2 are some top tier film bro material, this time round being Fight Club, and if anyone has seen my podcast €3 per movie, second plug, they'll know I have a very controversial opinion on this film, and that is that it isn't very special. Now again, don't get me wrong, it's a very well made film. The twist ending is very famous and honestly quite good first time around, and even makes multiple watches really fun. The performances are all infectious. Helena Bonham Carter is a personal standout for me, but that's all I think this film is. Fun. I don't think that it's the high art people perceive it at. I don't think its social deconstruction on toxic masculinity is as poignant and elevated as some people believe it is. I mean, it's even to the point where a whole chunk of this film's fanbase completely misunderstand and misinterpret it. It does get points for calling out toxic masculinity before that phrase even became a thing, let alone a buzzword. But ding ding ding, it's that word again. I think it's massively overrated. Now this is kind of a trend with film bros because obviously they just think that these films are better than they are. Well, at least some of them. And I think this is one of those cases. I'm putting it in the it's fine tier, but at least at the top. I'm not ever going to choose to see this again unless it's for a Fincher watch through or something, but yeah, it's fine, I suppose. And our next film is Pulp Fiction, and all apologies to my brother, but another hot take here, this film really is not my kind of jazz. I used to like this film quite a lot, but on my latest Tarantino watch through, it really clicked for me how hollow I find this experience. It's quotable for sure, but that's quite literally my biggest problem with it. Every line or conversation piece feels so intended to be nothing that it kinda turns out to be nothing. The disjointed storytelling is brilliant, and I think this film did a lot in the way of making indie cinema popular. Sam Jackson is excellent as we know, and it is all very entertaining. But despite so much happening, I just don't think there's a whole lot going on. Which is okay, there's a place for those kinds of movies, but I just prefer a bit more substance with my style. Also, I think it's sort of baffling that this is the one from Tarantino that gets the most praise when he has, in my opinion, way better movies. Regardless, it's a decent time, but kind of nothing for me. Then we have Scarface. I said at the top of this video that gangster films aren't really my genre, but this is one of those exceptions. I really love this film. Perhaps it's due to my Brian De Palma love, but I think the stylization of this film is super specific and has so much more commentary on these rags to riches type characters that most gangster films are reluctant to even brush over. The action set pieces are exciting, especially the bathroom scene, and especially that iconic finale. Al Pacino gives the performance of a lifetime, and yeah, it's Scarface, I don't know what you want from me. I don't think it's super top tier, but it is a film that film bros gravitate to that I actually think is good. So that's exactly where it's going into actually good. And next we have a weird one, which is Blade Runner 2049, which at current standing isn't attached entirely to film bros, but I do see that trend heading up. But I'm here to tell you that this Denis Villeneuve film is actually fantastic. Easily one of the best looking films of the 2010s, and honestly probably the best looking film on this entire tier list. I think this film goes over similar themes as the first as to what really makes us human, and if we can't differentiate what's created and what's born, then does it really matter? Also, this takes a step further by having a mixture of those states of being and then adds in the moral philosophy of where they stand and what that means for those that came before. It's very interesting and takes a deep dive into the soul and ventures through the pathways of consciousness, love and purpose. I definitely think it's better than the original. I think it builds the universe much better. Dave Bautista, though being in it for only a fraction of the runtime, is excellent. It's one of the few movies Jared Leto isn't completely detestable in. Ryan Gosling, of course, smashes this silent type protagonist again. I genuinely think he's a true generational talent. The letdown here is sadly Harrison Ford, who I know people love, but I think he's really phoning it in here. Now luckily his character is supposed to be disheveled and broken, but he truly is a big wad of nothing here. But regardless, I think this film is genuine cinema. Put it up there. Going back to back with bangers, next we have The Social Network, which I think is David Fincher's best work. I don't want to deep dive into this too much because I think this film is a masterpiece. Every single time I see it, I'm glued to the screen. The dialogue is perfect and expertly acted. The casting choices are flawless across the board, and I love what this film means to me and what this film means to cinema. It's a great example of a fictionalized retelling of real events to the effect of creating a compelling narrative that otherwise would be incredibly boring had it been a true adaptation of real events. It also kind of has nothing to do with Facebook, which is brilliant. There is weirdly not a lot about Facebook's legacy in this film. It is very much the characters and the relationships between them and how they evolve and shape depending on where each of the characters are in their journeys. It's what sets itself apart from the current corporate ad films, which are mostly pretty average and forgettable times. So yeah, if you couldn't tell, genuine cinema. Next up we got Whiplash, our second Damien Chazelle film, and I just think this film is better than La La Land. Also, I'm just kind of like looking at the tier list right now and I think Prisoners is too high, so when I put this in I'm going to adjust the rankings. So anyway, Whiplash hits an energy many of these films cannot capture. Its commentary on passion and what it takes to be great is nuanced and honestly difficult to swallow. J.K. Simmons is here proving why he's one of the best actors of all time. The brutality he channels is one that has a sincerity to it that makes it both difficult to watch but almost easy to understand. Miles Teller definitely gives his best performance here, and I hope he can recapture the magic he performed here. So yeah, I don't know, this film is good. In fact, it's actually good, but Prisoners is just a decent time. Then we got Seven, which is another crime film from Fincher, and honestly one of the weaker ones. I think Zodiac is far greater than Seven, but I understand for its time it was very influential in terms of crime thrillers or crime horror or whatever you want to label it. I think the concept is quite amazing. Kevin Spacey, before we knew he was a weirdo, plays his character quite good, but I just don't think there's much movement here. The story goes places, but I'm not too sure the characters do. They're more realised and defined by the end, but they're defined in the way that they always were, just more explicit. There isn't that much growth. There is, but not really too much. Not as much as you would expect from a film like this. It has a shocking ending and it's a fun time, but not one you'll really be thinking about after you see, or at least for any other reason than going, "Ooh, that moment was cool." It's easily digestible, the horror elements are well done, but put in perspective of other crime films like Decision to Leave or The House That Jack Built, Prisoners, and even Gone Girl and Zodiac from Fincher himself, it doesn't actually seem that good, so it's gonna slot in right at the bottom of the decent time tier. Okay, another lightning round because Goodfellas is next, and the reason I'm going to do that is because I actually don't like this movie too much. I think Pesci is inspired, the rest of the cast do a good job, I like the vibe, the momentum is well kept, but again, it's just one of those gangster films that doesn't connect with me, so I'm going to put it in It's Fine, and I'm going to hope that you don't hate me for it. Next one is going to be a lightning round also because it's The Usual Suspects, which is a film I used to think was incredibly fantastic, but as time has gone on, I've grown to actually kind of hate it. I admire it a lot for what it did for me in terms of getting into film, but overall, I find myself not enjoying it on a rewatch. I tried to see it recently and turned it off, which I never really do. So I'm putting it in the actually bad tier, which feels awful, but at the same time, it's just my opinion, although it is better than Donnie Darko. Okay, next we complete the foreign cinema duology for Film Bros, Parasite. This won Best Picture at the Oscars, which I suppose was deserved, and I am glad to see Bong Joon-ho get his flowers on the western side of the world, but I do wish he got them for a much better film in his filmography. Memories of Murder and Mother, in my opinion, being better examples of his capabilities, but again, this is an example of Film Bros looking at a foreign director and taking the most surface level film they can find and attaching themselves to it. Now, Parasite is a good film, a great film even. It's a well-made deconstruction of the social divide in South Korea, but anyone that's invested almost any time at all into Korean cinema can tell you that is not a unique concept at all. I mean, that's even what Squid Games is about at its core, and those are just two of the biggest Korean exports to the West in recent memory, but I think films like 2018's Burning from Lee Chang-dong handle the subject in a much more interesting way. Regardless, I think that this film is good. It's actually good. Which I can't say the same for our next contestant, which is Interstellar. Which is, yeah, just fine. Like, look, it's a very well-made movie, it has a lot of good concepts, and that's about it. I think there is a near-perfect film here, but it's just so lost in all the excess. This film is pushing nearly 3 hours, and I cannot see why. For what it achieves in such a runtime is honestly sad, because it feels both full of missed potential and also cluttered with too much fat. So I'm actually going to put it in the bottom of the It's Fine tier, literally being held up by a hair because of the performances and great visual storytelling Nolan pulls off. Next we have Drive, which for a while felt like an underrated movie until the Film Bros got their grubby hands on it, and now it's entered massively overrated territory. It boasts a brilliant cast in Bryan Cranston, Carey Mulligan, Oscar Isaacs, and of course Ryan Gosling. Gosling plays again a silent type character that quite literally has no name, simply credited as the driver. People compare this a lot to Baby Driver, and I'm not sure why. They both involve getaway drivers who are mostly silent protagonists, but other than that, they're not too similar at all. I do think Baby Driver is a much better film, but I don't think this film is bad either. In fact, I think it's very much a decent time. I do implore everyone to see it because I think there is something kind of special about it, but it's hard to get a good discourse on it without all the noise of unabashed praise from people just saying it's literally me. So yeah, decent time. Batting up next we have American Psycho, which is in the same field of existence as Fight Club, where the commentary is basically missed by the core audience that enjoys it, but unlike Fight Club, I think this is actually insanely fun. It's a shame so many people have drowned out the conversation surrounding this film because when you look at it through its social deconstruction lens, it's jaw-dropping. Showing us the viciousness it takes to become a successful businessman and the not-so-subtle metaphor of needing to be a complete psychopath in ways, Christian Bale gives a sinister but also deeply hilarious performance that I cannot believe people at the time thought would ruin his career. He absolutely kills it, pun intended, and he gets double points for taking an axe to Jared Leto's head. The supporting cast are great, especially Willem Dafoe. The memes are amazing. This film is actually really fucking good. It keeps you on your toes and you never quite know what's real and what isn't, and it's a film that you will be thinking about for a very long time afterwards. And speaking of, The Prestige is next, which is another film starring Christian Bale with so many twists and turns that you'll be thinking about for a long time afterwards. I personally think this is Christopher Nolan's best work and most underrated too. I don't actually see film bros talk about this one much, but I figure it's Nolan and also I just wanted to include it. The cast is stacked and every single one of them brings their A game. The metaphors of reinventing yourself and the stages of magic tricks in relation to one's life, and there is no shortage of allegories in this film. I'm actually going to cut this short because I will just end up doing a whole video essay right now on this film, so I'm just going to tell you that it's Nolan's magnum opus. I will do a video on it and it is genuine cinema. Next up we have our first and only Kaufman script in this tier list, which is certainly something, but Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind is one of those films that film bros love but they don't talk about as often, which is great because yeah, this film is great and I don't want the fan base of this film to be reduced to a syrupy, sickly base of stupidity. Jim Carrey took a true dramatic turn here that he only hinted at in Truman Show, and I'm glad he took that dive in a film that is so visually interesting and emotionally devastating. I feel so exhausted after finishing this movie, and that's its worth. Through all its complex annotation and comments on the intricacy of intimacy, it's essentially attempting to put the audience through what the characters are going through, and it does it expertly. Michel Gondry, along with his cinematographer Ellen Kuras, create a distinct look for this film that looks like no other. So yeah, not quite the levels of the top two, but it is for sure very, very good. But then we have American Beauty, which to me is a non-deep person's idea of a deep movie. At first you think the film is trying to say something, but honestly I don't think it is, and if it is, it isn't saying anything massively unique or eloquent. The whole bag in the wind metaphor is just fucking stupid. It feels like a parody of deep movies. I mean, it's literally a Katy Perry lyric. Everything is shallow and dull, and who knew that Kevin Spacey wasn't actually acting in this film? So yeah, I'm gonna throw it straight into the actually bad tier. I cannot see myself ever watching this film again. It has quite literally nothing to offer me. But something that does have a lot to offer is 2001: A Space Odyssey. Now, being transparent, I think this film is not aging the best. I think there are for sure other Kubrick films that have aged much better and I think are better in general, but that doesn't take away how much this film means to people because it truly is one of the most important movies ever made. And it is incredible that it was made when it was. I mean, scholars still talk about this film and deconstruct it. It's still shown in film schools and rightfully so. I suppose this is going to be a lightning round of sorts because I have not much to say on this film except it's iconic, it's important, I massively enjoy it and I think it's one of the many great Kubricks and it's a really good movie. And then we have Apocalypse Now, which I recently did a video about, which should tell you I think this film is phenomenal. I kind of shitted on the other Francis Ford Coppola film here, so it's good to be able to talk about one that I actually love. Admittedly, I think the story behind this film and the facts surrounding it are at times more entertaining than the film, but it's something here where it's just kind of hard to summarize a film so complex in such little time, so I'm not even going to attempt to. I think this is easily Coppola's best work. It's undeniably brilliant. Marlon Brando is used probably the best he ever was in his career here. Martin Sheen somehow pulls off this role, which shouldn't work, honestly. He should be entirely boring to watch. Because on paper, every character surrounding him is more interesting and does more and is in more action and has better lines and has a better backstory. But he brings a real sense of humanity to this character who is alone in an evidently pointless war filled with men who are also alone. It's a masterpiece by all accounts and is, in my opinion, some true fucking genuine cinema. And that brings us to our last film, the biggest film bro movie of all time in my opinion, Taxi Driver 2. Okay, right, no, this is Joker? Joker is such a fucking ripoff, I cannot believe it has an audience. Or at least the audience that it does. It's quite ironic that both this and Taxi Driver are film bro movies when one is a complete carbon copy of the other. The only thing this film really has in its corner is Joaquin Phoenix's performance, which is trying its hardest to hold up this bullshit ass movie. Now admittedly, I was excited for the sequel. After hearing it was going to be a musical, I became very interested because it seemed like it was going to find its own identity, which is what these performances deserve. But I recently heard that that film is taking deep inspiration from Coppola's One from the Heart, so that's all but telling me that the sequel plans to just rip off another auteur's classic work for a younger audience. So for real, what are we even doing here? Seriously. The biggest literally me character, it's fucking cringe, bottom tier. And that's it. That's the tier list. The positions in the tiers are honestly up for debate whilst I'm looking at it now, but I think each film is in the right tier. But again, this is all one man's opinion, which is just as equally valid as yours, and yours is just as equally valid as mine. So with that in mind, go to the pinned comment and do your own tier list and send it to me on Twitter here, or just simply comment your list. I look forward to seeing them, so let me know what you think. Let me know what you think of the video and whether it's one of these tier listed film bro movies or not. As always, keep watching movies.